Panthers couldn't hold on to a multi-goal lead against Edmonton in Game 1. The Oilers tilt the ice in the third period and overtime, and the Panthers now find themselves down in the series.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, June 5th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoPan12. That is Josh Appel from 560 WQAM. You could follow him on X at Josh Appel. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, the Florida Panthers lose to the Edmonton Oilers in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final by a final score of 4-3 in overtime. Leon Draisaitl got his second of his 2 goals in overtime on the power play after having a goose egg in last year's final. But Josh, the Panthers had a 2-1 lead after a failed challenge by Edmonton. They score twice in less than 2 minutes. Panthers had a 3-1 lead, but the multi-goal lead didn't even last long. And then the story of this one for me was the fact that Panthers couldn't really shut things down for the most part, and also the fact that it wasn't really a lot of time where the Panthers really had the ice tilted in their direction.
No, the second period was really the only period of the 3 plus overtime where the Panthers dictated play. They obviously had that pocket in the first period where they controlled play, but I think they were almost doubled up in shots in the first period. They only had a few in the third, and then outside of a push at the beginning and then a little bit of zone time before the Nosek delay of game penalty in overtime, do they really have sustained zone time? It was a Panther team to me that looked gassed in the third period and in overtime, which is surprising because this is not a team that over the last 3 years has, outside of an occasion here or there, really looked like a tired team, right? Like they almost looked tonight kind of like the Oilers did at the end of Game 7 last year where they just had nothing left in the tank. I don't think there's cause for too much concern, right? Like you go on the road to Edmonton to start the series and you want to leave with one of the two. And even if you fall down 2-0, you hope to go home and hold serve and send it back 2-2. Obviously, you want to get tonight. The Panthers had an opportunity. They were up 3-1. They don't blow those games very often. In fact, this is the first time under Paul Maurice, I think in 32 games in the playoffs, where they've held a lead after the first or second period and ended up losing the game. You pointed out, too, Leon Draisaitl, silent in the beginning of the series, really the whole series as a whole last Stanley Cup last year, and he was loud and productive, of course, tonight for Edmonton. And, you hate to see it for Tomas Nosek because he's been a quality player for the Panthers since being reinserted in the lineup. I don't know if Paul Maurice is going to give him a chance to bounce back in Game 2, but it would not shock me to see Nico Sturm slot in as the fourth-line center because that's just a mistake that cannot happen in that spot if you're Tomas Nosek. And that's not groundbreaking analysis or anything. Tomas Nosek knows that. I'm sure the coaching staff doesn't have to tell him that, but that just cannot happen in that spot. I can live with a stick infraction or, you get beat and you try and hook a guy to prevent a goal. I can live with that. A penalty like that late in overtime in that spot is really, really, really tough to swallow, and hopefully they're able to bounce back. They've proven time and time again they can.
Yeah, the best way I could put it is a goal off an unforced error. That's the best way. And to think that even in the first period for these two teams, I mean, it was a parade to the penalty box for both teams. I mean, Corey Perry goes to the box twice, one ending on Edmonton power play, and then there was a 4-on-3 after Ekblad bear hugged Leon Draisaitl. And to think that Jones and Gustav Forsling were on the ice, and then for the majority of that time, Barkov and Reinhart went on the ice at different times during that 4-on-3. And there were even times where I was thinking, okay, the Panthers are going to weather a storm here for for this game. And but the 4-on-3 was when they were up 2-1 and the ice was still tilted in their direction. I mean, Bobrovsky was making consecutive saves, one big stretch on a feed from Draisaitl to Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and then Bob got the pads just down on Viktor Arvidsson as well. And also there was points in this game where it was really just the Florida, although Connor McDavid was coming up with speed, I mean, they were forcing them to force it back low to high. And I mean, Evan Bouchard, I think he had like 6 shots on goal on the night. I mean, they were preventing.
Wallman had a good bunch too.
Yeah, Wallman was coming up with speed, and there was a big opportunity where Jones and Mikkola were using the stick, and Bob made an outstanding stop in overtime. But I mean, the fact that at times that they were forcing them to the outside, and also Connor McDavid in the first period was like his head was on fire with the amount of 2-on-1s, but there was this big stop that Gustav Forsling had, not Gustav Forsling, Nate Schmidt had on a slide. So I was thinking, okay,
how good was he tonight? By the way, Nate Schmidt, the two assists, unbelievable, and that defensive play you just mentioned.
Yeah, and then coming up into play after the Panthers, after Carter Verhaeghe supports the puck, and then getting it to Sam Bennett for one of the goals. I mean, you expect, you don't expect much from your bottom 6 or your third pairs, but when it's the Nate Schmidt, a guy who's coming into the mix for this team, wanting to be part of the Stanley Cup championship, I mean, yeah, I thought that he was outstanding for the Panthers. But really what it came down to is, like, when you're looking at the shot chart for the Panthers in the final 40, 8 shots in the third period and overtime. And I'm gonna mention this now, and I'll mention this a little bit later, but the amount of misconnections that the Panthers were having with breakouts out of their own end in overtime, I counted at least 5 times where they iced the puck, and I'm just thinking, I'm just scratching my head right here, and I'm just thinking, oh man, this could spell some bad news for the Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they looked gassed for whatever reason in the third period and in overtime, whether it was the layoff that finally got to them, but that's not a version of the Panthers that we're used to seeing. And against a team like Edmonton, I'll take my chances 5-on-5 against anybody in the league, including them. But you just felt like if you gave them another opportunity with a power play, you weren't going to be able to hold them at bay like they had in regulation. And unfortunately, it seemed like they might have actually been able to get into the second overtime for a while. What was the game-winning goal scored with, 30 seconds left? Something along those lines. It's a really, really tough one to swallow. I thought Sergei Bobrovsky was phenomenal tonight. I think the Panthers were fortunate to make it to overtime and to the end of overtime because of how well Bobrovsky played. He'll want that Arvidsson goal back. No doubt about it. Stuart Skinner, the best chance of the Panthers in overtime was, I think it was Verhaeghe who took the shot. Or no, it was Rodriguez. Rodriguez off a great feed from Reinhart on the boards, gets it to Rodriguez in the slot. Barkov comes across with the screen, and Stuart Skinner gets the bottom of his glove on it, barely to keep it out of the net. That was the best Panthers chance, I thought, in overtime. They didn't really have much after that. I think they were just trying to get to the room again to kind of reset mentally. And, they just put out the game score with all the analytics. All I know is if you're to the right, it's a good game. If you're to the left, not great. According to this chart, the game score, not great for the Panthers' top pair of Aaron Ekblad and Gustav Forsling tonight. And they were out there for over a half hour. I think they led all skaters in minutes tonight.
Over 30.
Yeah. Again, they'll need those two to be better if they're going to win this series. Point blank.
No doubt. And the thing is, the Panthers at times were able to get their set plays while winning their draws. And then really after the third period was really when they were really starting to really lose a lot of those draws. I mean, you don't really expect Sam Bennett to have a high face-off percentage whenever he's in the offensive zone. But I mean, it was just really about how they were able to just not be able to get on their forecheck. The Edmonton Oilers were anticipating a lot of the passes that the Panthers were doing, and that's really what caused them to just tilt the ice in their direction. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to give our 3 duds of the game, and we're going to discuss the moment where we knew the game was lost. We're going to discuss that and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. And ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO give you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you could stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check in your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's Monarch Money, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. Segment 2 here on this Thursday, June 5th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day, here with Josh Appel from 560 WQAM. And also, he's a play-by-play announcer, not only for Sports USA Live for the NFL, and also has gotten into some soccer on multiple levels. So once again, I want to say, I've said congratulations to you in person during the conference final, but I also want to say publicly, congratulations on the new gig for you, my friend. So
I appreciate that very much. It's been a really fun time. More USL Championship, MLS Next Pro, NWSL, USL Super League, all coming up through the end of the summer. So
yeah, no doubt. This wasn't the only overtime game that we saw on the night in the hockey world. The Western Conference Final in the AHL for the Calder Cup playoffs, they went to double overtime, and that game ended in double overtime. So the Charlotte Checkers are still waiting for their opponent in the Calder Cup Final. So we'll see what happens there. But 3 duds of the game for this one. So the third dud for me, you mentioned it. You mentioned the hockey stat cards, is the Gustav Forsling, Aaron Ekblad pair. The first goal was a big backbreaker because it was a lost board battle that resulted in working it up high, and then a whole bunch of opportunities at the net, rebound opportunities. Evander Kane was coming up, and then Leon Draisaitl pounce on a great opportunity, but that really all started with just a lost board battle in the corner with Gustav Forsling there, and then also the goal that the Edmonton Oilers scored on the Arvidsson one, even though that's more Sergei Bobrovsky there, even though it got him under the arm. So not the best game for Gustav Forsling and Aaron Ekblad for that pair. Number two dud, excuse me, Carter Verhaeghe. Man, the amount of zone time that we saw that second line have, but just couldn't hit the net. There were so many opportunities where Tkachuk would win a board battle, feed Carter Verhaeghe, shoots wide of the net. And there were times where there was even no screen, and then you had a chance. I felt like there was a lot of panic. And here's another thing about panic that I felt with Carter Verhaeghe's game on the defensive front. Wayne Gretzky, during the second intermission, said what Connor McDavid needs is to go to the outside, go towards the goal line, and then feed towards the top. And what happened on that third goal? That happens, and the forwards are too far into the end. And who's the one who was supposed to pick up Matias Ekholm? It was Carter Verhaeghe on that end. So number 2 dud for me. And number 1, this is the most obvious one. Tomas Nosek, unforced error because of the fact that it was unforced. Bad spot to take that penalty, and then the Edmonton Oilers pounced on the opportunity. So those are my 3 duds of the game. How about you?
yeah, I'm gonna go. Do we have to go 3-1, or can I go 1-3? Can I? Does it matter
Either
what
or.
order? All right.
Either or.
Nosek for me is 1. I agree with you on the Ekblad and Forsling pairing. My third dud is just the Arvidsson goal, and just one that, as great as Bob was, look, soft ones are going to happen. It gets magnified in games like this, and unfortunately, that was a big swing for the Panthers. They're up 3-1, and then all of a sudden, a seemingly innocuous shot gets by Bobrovsky, and it's 3-2 all of a sudden in a period where the Panthers played really well and probably deserved to be up by more than just 3-2 or 3-1, but Stuart Skinner was great in that period, and then Skinner, of course, made important saves on the few chances the Panthers did generate in the third period and in overtime. So not Bobrovsky as a whole, but just that one moment. But obviously, like, the big glaring one is Nosek. And again, he is played so well for the Panthers, and unfortunately a thing that he was known for before coming to Florida is something that comes and cost the Panthers here late in overtime on the road in game one. And like, again, this team does not lose games when they have the lead. They don't lose games when they have multi-goal leads. And so this is just a really, really tough one to swallow for a variety of different reasons. But yeah, those are the three duds for me tonight.
Yeah, and you're thinking, I believe it was like 25-0, 26. It was somewhere around there. I don't. It was somewhere.
The stat I just saw, I don't know if the meme was correct, but it said 31-1 now when leading after the first or second period in the playoffs.
Wow, I was thinking the second period, but yeah, if you combine those, it's in the 30s. But still amazing how the Panthers have been on the run that they were. But I mean, the Arvidsson goal, a minute 17 after you in a 60-minute game, you're thinking that you're just not. I'm not saying that the Panthers didn't give themselves an opportunity to relax, but I mean, whenever you have an extended period, you mess with the confidence, and the fact that they got it so quickly, you really can't really establish more things your way. You think that if you were able to make that stop, Edmonton would have to do a little bit more to just push, maybe be a little desperate in plays or force shots as well. So that's another thing of why that goal is such a big dud. So I understand why you put that there.
Right, you want to survive that 3 to 5 minute stretch after you score, right? Because you know that the opposition is going to try and push and get one right back. And like I said, unfortunately, that was just an innocuous looking play that turned into a goal. And unfortunately, those things get magnified in games like this. But again, they're not even in overtime if Bob doesn't play as well as he did. The Panthers do not give up this many shots over the course of a game very often. I know it's obviously inflated because of overtime, but you don't see them get outplayed like they did tonight very often at all. I don't expect them to look like this in game two. I think the encouraging thing would be that this was not even close to their best performance, and it took the most frustrating possible penalty in the last minute and a half of overtime on the road for the Oilers to come back and complete the comeback and win game one. So all things considered, I'm not trying to be I'm a glass half full guy. I'm not trying to say that this is a moral victory or anything, but I think you can fall back on the idea that this was not the Panthers' best, and this is what it still took for Edmonton to get game one. That's why it's frustrating not to steal it, because you were right there and had the lead.
Yeah. By the way, what did you think of the challenge for goaltender interference? I thought the Panthers might have gotten away with one.
Well, I think that it's worth challenging if you're Knobloch at Edmonton. To me, the contact with the defenseman sent Sam Bennett to the ground or to the ice. So to me, that negated any possible goaltender interference, and I think they got the call right.
Yeah. So it's one of those splitting hairs. Like, he's trying to get around, but hey, the fact that there was contact and he ended up there, it worked out in the Panthers
certainly worth the challenge.
No doubt. And hey, the Panthers were able to pounce very quickly thanks to Brad Marchand. That's another bright spot for the Panthers. The power play one wasn't really generating a lot of anything, and then power play two comes up big with a good amount of zone time, and then out in front for Brad Marchand to score in that little span. Moment where we knew the game was lost. I said this in the first segment. The fifth icing that the Panthers had. I'm just thinking, this is coming. The Panthers are gonna overthink something, and then it's gonna end up in the back of their net. So your moment.
Look, I'm a homer. I thought that, given just the mentality of this team and the things that they've overcome over the years, this 3-year run, I thought they were going to find a way. So until Tomas Nosek put that puck over the boards,
Okay.
I thought they were going to figure out a way and find a way. That was the moment for me that I was like, yeah, they're probably not surviving this one. And unfortunately, that was the case. But I'm curious, Armando. Paul Maurice loves to roll lines 1 through 4, and I'm the guy who said this Panthers, and I'm not the only one, but I've been banging this drum where the Panthers have the depth advantage over Edmonton and really anybody in the league at this point. And so, and I'm including the fourth line in that. What did you think of the fourth line being out there that late in overtime in that spot? I know the guys are clearly gassed, and you figure you trust that fourth line enough the way they've played and the way that Boquist has played in general to give you a shift and not have that kind of disaster. They would have been fine if Tomas Nosek puts that puck off the boards.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it might be kind of playing the result here, but how do you feel about Paul Maurice still rolling 4 lines there late in overtime?
I think we are playing the result here in this one. It's just like in the NBA where you're going through an 8-man rotation instead of using 10 or 11 guys on your bench instead.
Right.
So I just think that in a long game like this, you have to give them at least one shift.
Yeah.
From time to time. I know you're double shifting a lot. I mean, Barkov even double shifted on that last penalty kill where he was with Brad Marchand on that last one. So the minutes are going to be heavy, and I think maybe Sturm comes in, but you're going to give the fourth line another chance. I thought Jesper Boquist was also generating a lot of
his speed is important in this series. Like that's him being in AJ Greer has obviously given the Panthers great minutes, but I like Boquist's speed in this series against Edmonton being in there. I think you're right. I think we are playing the result a little bit because again, if he just puts the puck off the glass, we're probably not having this conversation, and the Panthers might still be playing right now instead of us doing a podcast. I know it's going to air the day after, but we are recording this post game. Am I allowed to say that? I'm saying
it. we're technically posting. We're technically still recording on the day that it is actually airing.
True. Actually, it's a good point. It is after midnight, so we are we are recording the day after.
Right here.
So sorry about that. Maybe we are being a little hard on Paul Maurice. Like it's one of those things where you get to this point. Rolling 4 lines, you're going to keep doing that, especially when you're trying to give your top guys a little bit of a breather right before the end of the first overtime. I just think that that's one thing that maybe you look back on and think maybe if somebody out there was different. But again, totally playing the result, and it's just a question that I was thinking about.
No, that's a valid one. And I was also thinking the Panthers survived the power play going from the second to the third period where it was 4 shots on goal for Edmonton, and then once they got it to the third period, none. So I was thinking, I know there was a 17-second difference for if they were to go to the second overtime, but I was just thinking, man, if you just survive this one, but hey, unfortunately, puck goes to the wall, Nico Mikkola commits to the corner, and then Leon Draisaitl's open on near the blue paint. So
Armando, what makes the Panthers penalty kill great and the best in the league in the postseason? It's how aggressive they are.
Pressure.
Yep. And that pressure, that aggressiveness kind of bit them in the end there.
Yeah.
Over pursue, Draisaitl open where he was, and you kind of live by the sword, die by the sword with how good the Panthers penalty kill has been.
Good saying there for that.
Love a good cliche.
Yeah, love it. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where although the Panthers lost, they did set there are a few records that were set for the Panthers here in Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final. We're going to discuss that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment 3 here on this Thursday, June 5th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday, here with Josh Appel from 560 WQAM and play-by-play voice. And Sam Bennett, 2-goal performance for him on the night, now sets a single playoff record, franchise record for the Panthers in most goals, passing Sam Reinhart from last year. I always ask this question when it comes to the Sams. Does Bill Zito like green eggs and ham? So that's the question I like to ask. And also, the Panthers set an NHL record with the most road goals in a single postseason in NHL history. And to think that This league spans since the 1910s. The Stanley Cup was awarded in the 1800s, but the NHL didn't exist until the 1910s. To think that the Panthers are in this company, 19 different goal scorers for them. The record is the 2019 Boston Bruins. And so when I look at a game like this, yeah, the Panthers looked gas, and you're thinking Sam Bennett's record and the amount of goals that they still scored. I'm just thinking that, like you said, glass half full kind of guy. I'm just thinking, okay, missed opportunity, but there is still that chance. I mean, Edmonton even had a missed opportunity in game 1 of the Western Conference Final, 3 power play goals against, and they still found a way to bounce back.
Look, I was thinking about this tonight about Sam Bennett. First off, I think 11 of his goals have come on the road in this postseason too.
11 of his 12, yes.
An insane stat. But I was thinking, if the Panthers do ultimately win this series and win their second consecutive Stanley Cup, people kind of feel, I feel like the conversation has been, well, the Conn Smythe will go to Bob, or the Conn Smythe will go to Alexander Barkov. If Sam Bennett ends this series having the same type of impact, I'm not going to say he's going to score 2 goals every night, but if he continues his scoring touch and he finishes the series as the playoff leader in goals, how does Sam Bennett not get heavy consideration for the Conn Smythe? That's how good he's been in this postseason. And I think that Sam Bennett ultimately ends up staying a Florida Panther. But
really?
if he doesn't, a team is paying for what they get from Sam Bennett in April, May, and June. Right? Mm-hmm. He's 20-goal scorer in the regular season, right? Probably one of the top 5 second-line centers across the NHL. I think we can all agree on that. With the cap going up, and with how he performs in the postseason, how many teams are desperate to emulate the Panthers' playoff model and roster build and how they play in the postseason, if he ends up leaving, it's going to be because a team will overpay for what he's done in the postseason with the Panthers, especially a postseason like this, like the one he's currently having. But I do think that he ultimately ends up remaining down here in South Florida.
I hope so. And it's funny, Anson Carter on the broadcast was discussing Nazem Kadri as the best comparison. Big postseason performer, and then he goes to Calgary. Unfortunately, they haven't even been in the playoffs since he signed that 7-year deal with the Flames. And I mean, if you get Nazem Kadri back in the postseason, I know he had a rough start in Toronto with the suspensions and everything. But you get him back, he's going to be an impactful player. I mean, this is what Sam Bennett does. And just the fact that the finishing of the checks, the fact that he was matching up against Connor McDavid. And to think that even in this game, Josh, that what's impressive about this from the Edmonton Oilers side of things, which give credit where it's due. We spoke about, when I was previewing this series, we were discussing, okay, when McDavid and Draisaitl go on the ice together, their depth has been able to still step up. It was really the third period where they were playing a majority of their shifts together. We saw a shift or two in the first 40 minutes, but then it was really starting to tilt, and still the Panthers were, and Connor McDavid wasn't playing as many penalty kill minutes last year as he was this year. He was double shifting on the penalty kill as well, and then coming up with speed when necessary. And to think that they were able to still do that in this game while having those two on the ice together, I'm like, man, this is it's going to be interesting to see how Paul Maurice and company adjust.
Well, obviously, it's such an advantage for Edmonton to have that last change at home. But again, like going into this series, you're the Panthers. You're not thinking, all right, we're going to shut down Connor McDavid, we're going to shut down Leon Draisaitl, and that's going to be that. You just hope that you can contain them in a singular game. And unfortunately for them tonight, they weren't able to, right? And I think that's the frustrating part, right? Again, is that you had the lead, multi-goal lead. You had the lead going into the third period. And again, I talked earlier about how I think the Panthers have the depth advantage. I know Draisaitl scored the first and the last goal, but it was Arvidsson and it was Ekholm. And I thought Podkolzin had a great game. I thought Kapanen had a great game. He almost scored.
Had a great chance at the end.
Yeah, I thought Kapanen was great tonight. And the depth for Edmonton is certainly a lot better than it was from last year. I still think the Panthers have the advantage of that department. I mean, you're not going to find a better third line anywhere than Marchand, Luostarinen, and Anton Lundell. But maybe I underestimated the Edmonton depth a little bit because they got contributions from up and down the lineup tonight, and their big guys got it started. Their big guys finished it off, and the little guys filled in the gaps in between.
Mm-hmm. And it goes back to the conversation that I feel like was repeated so many times through not just this podcast, but just national outlets is the Panthers are better and the Edmonton Oilers are better. To think 8 Stanley Cup Final games between these two teams combined, and this was the first one to go into overtime, and we almost got a second one. It just goes to show just how these teams are not big risk takers when it comes to just. I mean, they were discussing it even in the game telecast of the Panthers not pinching as much as they were late in the game, and you don't want an opportunity given to the Edmonton Oilers coming up with speed on an odd man rush. But the fact that the net front is getting cleaned up more easily when it comes to these two teams. I know it's only one game out of this final, but I also want to relate it to last year, the fact that it took the 8th game to get into overtime. I mean, it goes back to how true that is about these two teams both being better.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt that these are the two best teams in the NHL, and I think that's a win for the league that the two best teams are battling it out again for the Stanley Cup. And you said it earlier, like, you have to give credit to Edmonton for their performance. I would say dogging, but we're talking down on the Panthers a lot tonight because it's a Panthers podcast, but you've got to give credit to Edmonton for sticking with it and coming back at home and winning that first game. So credit to them. But again, the Panthers had their opportunities to protect the lead. They're normally very good at that. And I'm wondering if what the telecast pointed out about the Panthers D-men getting a little less aggressive, pinching down late in the game. I wonder, it probably had to do with being a little more conservative and not wanting to get beat on the rush. But I just wonder if the energy was a factor and the amount of gas in the tank they had left late, if that was a reason why they weren't pinching like we might normally see. So I'm just curious. Just that period, the team in the third period and overtime did not look like the Panthers team that we're used to. They usually are the team that it's the famous, I reference it all the time. It's the Paul Maurice quote on the bench against Boston. You get up 3-1, you try and make all the plays, F the plays, get the puck deep, pound their D, so in game 7 they got nothing left. And this felt like in game 1 that for whatever reason the Panthers had nothing left in the third period and overtime. So hopefully they're able to regroup after the long travel, recover, rest tomorrow, and game 2 on Friday. They're able to have a little more sustained energy throughout the game because, again, one of the wildest things to me about this run over the last 3 years is what's the stat for Reinhart and Forsling? They've each played over 300 games over the last 3 years or whatever it is. They haven't looked like a team really at all that has played that much hockey over the last 3 years. Tonight, I think it was, like I said earlier, was the first time that it looked like that. And against a team like Edmonton, when they're at home, unfortunately, you're going to be on your heels a bit.
Only one loss that Edmonton has lost at home throughout these playoffs. Thing is, thankfully, after 2,500 miles of travel for the Panthers, and usually on off days, especially if there's a 1-day gap, they don't get on the ice for practice. And honestly, there's not much practicing that you can do now these days as far as adjustment. There's video, there's conversation, and you just go for there. So we'll see what's going to happen. We probably won't find out on lineup updates on Greer
until warm-ups, I would imagine.
Until warm-ups, maybe. So just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a warning to not expect any major updates tomorrow. Maybe on AJ Greer. Maybe that's maybe the only one that we might get. So we'll see.
Are you clamoring to have do you think AJ Greer in this series is better to have out there than Jesper Boqvist? Just the speed factor? I don't think so. I think the Panthers can still play plenty heavy without AJ Greer in the lineup. And that's no disrespect to him because, again, he's performed phenomenally well for Florida in the playoffs since being put back in the lineup. I just don't know if that's the move you make after this game. Because I don't think having AJ Greer in over Jesper Boqvist makes a difference tonight. Like, I don't think the Panthers win if that's the switch that gets made.
Especially with very few minutes that they play. So,
right.
So, yeah. But, Josh, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Always appreciative of you joining me here on the show. Tell everybody where they can follow you online and your work.
You can follow me at Josh Appel, JOSHAPPEL on Twitter, Instagram, Josh_Appel. Monday and Thursday, game 3 and game 4, I will be filling in on the Hockman, Crowder, and Solana show on 560 WQAM from the arena, 2 to 6 on those days. And then you can hear me doing some USL Championship soccer most Saturdays. So there's that. Thanks for letting me get the plug in.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. And I will see you again very soon.
Yeah, hopefully we get to do this again after a win at some point in this series.
No doubt. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Josh Appel, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.